During a time when video game enthusiasts want nothing more than to come together and enjoy what makes them gamers to begin with, developer People Can Fly was crafting a potential godsend. Published by none other than Square Enix, Outriders is a co-op optional third-person looter shooter set in a universe where humans have destroyed their home planet of Earth, going forth into the depths of space with the intent of discovering a new world to inhabit. With one of 4 powered classes to choose from, gamers have the chance to tear through humans and altered humans alike, as well as ferocious beasts. After spending several hours playing the demo released almost 2 months before the full release, completing all the missions available with every character class on both the PS5 and Xbox One, I downloaded Outriders via the Xbox Game Pass. For some reason the PC Game Pass isn't offering the game, with the intent of taking my trickster character through the turbulent world of Enoch. Not knowing real-world problems would be more turbulent than anything Outriders had to offer. Just like its predecessors in the genre, Outriders is built on co-op gameplay, with gamers going throughout several environments to complete missions both main and side, with the latter being broken up into a variety of conditions, including hunting down gigantic beasts, similar to what is seen in other missions later on in the story, or finding and killing bandits, always surrounded by a force of followers ready to die for said target. While finishing battles galore, players gain color-coded loot that can be modified, dismantled, or sold, with the obvious intent of getting the best gear possible. After a little over 50 hours with my trickster character, I completed the main story, all of the side missions after reaching World Tier 11, before starting the in-game expeditions mode. A grandiose 15-mission series of time battles where enemies are more numerous than anything seen elsewhere in the game, as is the loot. After experiencing the insanity of expeditions, it became obvious to get the best rewards, it'll take a lot of gear grinding and teaming up with players also ready to run through a stage in a ridiculously short amount of time to attain that legendary loot. Something that may seem pretty uninspired and not that much fun for those defensive-minded and/or solo characters. Achievements and trophies are pretty simple, such as reaching character level 30 and completing all the story and side missions. But completionists will have to grind beyond gaining gear and expeditions, including completing accolades, a series of in-game challenges that, when completed to level 5, offer customizable features for things like the banner displayed at the camp used for fast traveling, and of course, gear. These accolades will have players killing a ridiculous amount of enemies with class-specific abilities, filling up the journal of in-game information, and simply teaming up with other players, a system that will add at least another 50 hours to someone's playtime if they choose to accept the completionist grind. The people of Earth have ruined their home place, and the search for a new planet gives way to discovering a potential inhabitable world before it all goes to hell. The opening 30 minutes establish both the world of Enoch and its ecosystem, as well as the core gunplay that is rooted in stereotypical run-and-gun gameplay, with a cover system that is usually useless, as adversaries will flank the player's character and bombard them with grenades. Not to mention the lacking functionality of said cover system, where the player's character may hop onto or over the barrier, instead of running to another cover point, due to one button being used for everything involving the cover system. Following the story's prologue, the change occurs both for the player's character and the plot, as the anomaly overtakes Enoch and transforms certain people into altered beings, sporting specific powers including one of 4 classes the player can choose from. The aforementioned trickster is a master of time manipulation that can do things like teleport behind an enemy to unleash a potential one-shot kill, or toss temporal knives that spread across several enemies to slow them down, while making the trickster's next attack do double damage against the targeted foe. The Pyromancer uses fire attacks, such as summoning a pillar of flames that can go forward to engulf and burn nearby enemies, or even yank an adversary toward the player's character, a la Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. A Devastator character will utilize the earth as a way to tank their way through enemies, while performing gigantic seismic-inducing stomps and ripping the ground below to barricade said character's body for temporary protection and damage reduction. The Technomancer class is the most sensitive in terms of taking damage, but features some of the most impressive long-range attacks in the game, including summoning rocket launchers and turrets that'll freeze enemies in their tracks. Though Outriders does have a cover system, health doesn't automatically regenerate fully while simply crouched behind a barricade. Instead, every character regains health by killing enemies, though the Technomancer gets a little bit of a health restoration assist, as said character class can get health back by simply doing damage to an enemy to offset the fact that Technomancer characters have less health and base defense stats compared to their counterparts. Though every class has its positives and negatives, like the Pyromancer class not doing as much damage as expected with their skills, but a majority of said abilities causing status effects that make up for the lack of brute force, it's hard to deny how fun it is to put in a little time with each class to see what works for the player. There are also melee attacks that utilize elemental properties to accent a physical strike, and character class options including specified skill trees for each class that have multiple branches connected to 3 endpoints. It's impossible to attain enough points to fill out the entire tree, with the developers opting to give players the chance to reset their used skills to redistribute said points as they see fit. But the real standout implementations in terms of gameplay are the World Tier difficulty system and the gear and loot. World Tiers act not only just as a difficulty setting, but also an overall reward system both in-game and for the player personally. With up to 15 World Tiers, players can raise or lower the difficulty at any time, but higher the difficulty, the better the loot drops. While players can experience the entire story on the lowest World Tier setting, to obtain epic and legendary gear outside of controlled moments, like completing certain story points, it's imperative that the player take part in playing on the highest World Tier level obtained via experience points earned by simply winning battles. World Tier increases obviously makes enemies tougher and more bullet sponge in nature, but gear loadout is just as important in regards to the player succeeding than what World Tier level is currently being played. Every gear item is put in one of 4 rarity categories: common, rare, epic, and legendary. Depending on the rarity level and what type of weapon or armor obtained will be the difference between buffing a character's armor and health, or increasing firepower and the effectiveness of class skills or anomaly attacks. Through the game's crafting system, players can utilize resources procured by loot drops during battle, harvesting ores when journeying through maps, bought from vendors, or obtained by disassembling gear in the player's inventory to level up the remaining weapons and armor. Said resources can also increase the attributes of any gear to allow for better healing from kill shots or close range damage depending on what piece of gear is being upgraded. Though every piece of gear's rarity level can be upgraded if it's below epic quality, players can't craft legendary items and are completely at the mercy of the game's loot random number generator. The other inclusion in regards to crafting that really makes Outriders loadouts so entertaining are mods. Depending on the gear's rarity, there will be 1 or 2 mod slots. Rare items have 1 slot, while epic and legendary gear have 2 mod slots. These mods allow for players to take advantage of the game's status effect systems and buffing their characters' abilities and weaponry. Weapon modifiers will afford the player a chance to toxify their bullets, or make it so each shot that lands replenishes a small bit of health. Armor mods focus on adding to the effectiveness of class abilities and helping the player's chances for survival. Armor mods can provide, say, the Trickster's Cyclone Spin a longer duration, or inflict the weakness status ailment on any foe hit by the player's human tornado. A mod like Ice Trap 2 unleashes a shockwave of freeze ailment towards enemies in a 5-meter radius when the protagonist's health goes below 30% and can mean the difference between life and death. There are some stipulations to mod attainment and implementation, including players having to dismantle weapons and armor to obtain mods for future usage on any other gear. Unfortunately, players can only modify one of 2 slots on a piece of gear at a time. Once the player changes a mod to one slot, the other slot locks the untouched mod permanently, meaning that players may have to sacrifice a mod they enjoy for another that may not be as beneficial. With that being stated, the amount of gear and loot the player is provided from regularly playing will make this limitation of one mod slot change per item feel non-existent, as the player just moves their desired mod to another piece of gear. All of these systems tie into the overall interactions with enemies. Outside of the regular gun-using grunts are altered humans that can perform class skill attacks too. Altered enemies can also become resistant to elemental attacks and status ailments if the player continuously uses everything but pure lead. There are also a plethora of monsters that range from acid spitters who love to stay on the outside to gigantic birds that can use their feathers as spear-like projectiles. Though most of the AI enemies are just about pushing forward and getting gunned down, there is definitely a nice level of strategy when working around an arena, especially when taking on some of the few major boss fights. Beyond the mostly stellar gameplay and customization options, including the ability to modify how the main transportation rover looks, though it can't be driven, is a forgettable narrative featuring shallow characters, including the rather ridiculously gruff protagonist. There are some harrowing emotional moments later in the plot that would mean so much more if the player was really given a reason to care about these characters. This lack of making the protagonists feel actually relatable is made worse by the fact the main adversary is pretty much non-existent, with the final boss being thrown into the role after a couple of late game interactions. On the opposite end of the spectrum are the side mission story presentations. While the side mission plots aren't unique, they do a great job of showcasing the emotional toll being on Enoch has done to those who survived the planet's retaliation for being on forbidden territory. But like the main missions, the side mission objectives usually boil down to going to a certain area, killing a bunch of things before picking up an object, if the killing itself isn't the point of reason. Another interesting aspect in regards to side missions is that a majority of them are replayable due to the fact each side mission presents 3 rewards, with the player being able to only choose one at a time. Though a majority of the time better items are offered by simply playing another mission instead of replaying a side mission. Outriders' biggest issue boils down to its technical proficiency. Beyond unpredictable frame rate drops that are few and far between no matter what system is being used, are the rather impressive graphics and environments, even though it's cross-generational. The chaotic sounds of battle comes across immaculately, though the voice acting leaves a lot to be desired, including sound mixing during cutscenes. The map presentation is terrible, with the mini-map just being a sight cone with a couple of markers like ammo replenishing spots and non-environmental identifiers. The overview map is just as bad as the mini-map, by rigidly indicating where the player is without any type of zoom or marker function. Then there's the waypoint path system that can be activated with the touch of a button that, at times, decides to path itself through areas unavailable to the player during that moment. Though Outriders doesn't have a live service system by featuring a closed narrative and a definitive endgame, this is an online-only experience. Every player has to log into the game's server before they can start playing solo or in multiplayer, with the latter allowing up to 3 players to drop in and out of a game at any moment seamlessly. A multiplayer functionality that is incredibly fun with others who have a good internet speed and connectivity. If the servers don't work or are being updated, the player can't even play even if they want to do so by themselves, an issue that has plagued Outriders since launch. Add that to the fact server stability is a huge issue, and if a game loses connection to the server, it's back to the title screen no matter what the player was doing, including taking on a boss. The server issues were complemented by inventory wipes for certain players where their equipment couldn't be restored, a disappearing on-screen HUD, or the player's character turning invisible while becoming stuck in the world, and random glitches like textures being unable to load, or enemies just waiting around to be murdered. Outriders is one of the most fun experiences one can get in regards to the genre, with the multiplayer adrenaline junkie who loves stats in mind. Unfortunately for all the positives, the gameplay, the crafting system, and an extensive endgame, there are some major issues that prevents Outriders from being a must-play game at this time, especially if someone has terrible internet connectivity or just don't like playing with others. Not to mention the underwhelming narrative that comes across as the most overwrought fanfiction of your favorite sci-fi series. For those who love games like Borderlands and Gears of War, while enjoying the idea of crafting the best weapon and armor possible via the tools provided, this is a near-perfect experience from a gameplay perspective. But the glaring issues, including unpredictable server stability, glitches, and a forgettable story presentation, can make Outriders something players should definitely wait for to be patched into a more acceptable state if they don't have Xbox Game Pass. If someone has Xbox Game Pass, no matter if they're playing on an Xbox One or Series X or S, playing Outriders through the service is the way to go as of this time. Once the server problems and technical issues are fixed, fans of this genre shouldn't think twice about buying Outriders, just like one wouldn't hesitate about completing a bounty.
Outrider detected.
Cullen, the bandit leader's taken care of. Your pass is clear. Where'd these bandits come from anyway?
They were insurgents. Defected to our...
What happened to a place beyond the storms, huh?
We are about to go farther than any man has ever gone before.